Today I want to spend the next several weeks talking to you on how to handle the seasons of life. I want you to discover how God uses breakdowns to create breakthroughs so we can break out into a new season of victory with the Lord on our side. The question is, through the seasons of life when it's all said and done, have you been praising God or complaining to God? Have you questioned God, or perhaps you know someone who's walked away from Him? Now, speaking of disappointments, I heard a story about 4 passengers but only 3 parachutes in an airplane that was going down. The first passenger said, I'm a leading heart surgeon. My patients need me. And he grabbed the first parachute and he jumped. The second passenger said, I'm a rocket scientist, one of the smartest men on earth. My country needs me. He took a parachute and jumped. The third passenger was a famous priest. He said to the fourth passenger, a 10-year-old Boy Scout, I'm old and frail. You take the parachute. The Boy Scout said, that's okay, sir. We still have 2 more parachutes because the world's smartest man who just jumped out took my backpack. Boys, that rocket scientist is going to be disappointed when he opens that chute. When you experience hard or difficult times, how do you handle those seasons? I know in God's Word we see people constantly who dealt with difficult seasons, but I want to focus on how they responded to those seasons with you over the next couple of weeks and the next couple of devotionals. You see, I've discovered, just like in nature, there are 4 seasons that we will face sometime or another in our lives and I want to talk to you about how to handle those seasons by looking at a family that Jesus was very close to in Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in John 11. The first season that all of us will face sometime could be a disappointing season with God. If you've gone through that, or you're going through that kind of a season in 2020, let me just say this, that you are in good company. In the midst of difficulties, I've heard Christians say things like, it was during that moment of my life that I began to grow in God. Or I've heard people say in difficulties, during my difficult season that I went through, my faith was strengthened. In The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis, he says, and I quote, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our conscience, but He shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Close quote. Isn't it amazing how God uses bad, big, bold, unexpected disappointments and waiting periods of our lives to build our faith? James writes this to the Christians in James 1:2-4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Why should we be joyous? Well, the verse reads, because you know the testing of your, what's that word? Faith. James says there's a relationship between the disappointing seasons of life that causes us to say, like it says in verse 3, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. So what does that persevering faith look like? Well, it's found in verse 4. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing or anything. James, the brother of Jesus, says there's an important link between the difficult seasons and our faith, and this is how we grow as a disciple of Christ. One of the most amazing relationships you see of this is coming together is found in one of the most famous stories in John 11. In this event, we see how committed God is to leveraging divine seasons of miraculous disappointments in what happened with Lazarus. Now in verse 1 of John 11, it says, Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister Martha. Now we understand that Mary and Martha were not some ordinary Joes, but they were rather kingdom chums with Jesus. They were His friends who supported His ministry financially. And Jesus had been to their home, and that included Lazarus, and they were all very close to Him. In verse 3 it says, So the sister said to Jesus, the Lord, the one you love is sick. Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in a personal way. You see, Jesus didn't know everyone in that town, but He sure knew who they were. Verse 4 says, when He heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. Jesus is reminding us today that sickness, illness, disease can still be used for God's glory. So I know what some of you might be thinking right now. You might be saying, so let me get this straight, Pastor. You're telling me that God would allow me to go through suffering, sickness, and pain so that somehow the world could look at Him through me and my suffering? Yeah. Well, look at verse 5. Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and her sister, and Lazarus. Now, if He loves them, He wouldn't allow them to get sick. He wouldn't allow Lazarus to get sick, would He? If He loves them, He's going to do something and rush out to them. And since God is love, we know how this is going to be a great situation. It's going to turn out great. But look at what happens in the second season. And I want to talk to you about that as we continue in our devotional, how to handle the seasons of life. as I ministered to you about what Mary and Martha experienced during the second season called the waiting season of hope on Thursday, June 4th. So no matter how disappointing or bleak things may seem, just remember from Mary, Martha, and Lazarus and their experience that God is still in the business of resurrecting things, even when things seem disappointing. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to allow me to minister to you. God bless you, and keep hope alive during this month of June and beyond. Love you, and have a glorious day.